Good morning, Marijuana Nation. It's Monday, October 2nd, 2017, and you're tuned in to episode 342 of Marijuana Today Daily. I'm your host, Shay Gunther, and I'll be walking you through today's marijuana news and headlines. As always, we have a full and busy day of cannabis news in our hands, so let's jump right into it. Our top story of the day is the news that the Canadian province of Quebec will set the minimum age for people to purchase legal adult use marijuana to 18. This is a big break from legal U.S. states, which have all set their minimum age to 21, as well as from other Canadian provinces such as Ontario, which pegged their age limit to 19. From the sounds of it, Quebec government officials are taking a pragmatic approach to the whole thing, admitting that young people are going to smoke cannabis one way or another, and that they'd rather have those sales happen in a regulated environment. The other big part of the announcement made at the end of last week concerns where Quebec legal cannabis will be sold. Rather than allow independent shops and dispensaries to handle sales, the government will control the industry through a centralized government-controlled entity that will run all the cultivation, processing, and dispensing sides of the business. The New York Daily News is reporting that Shane McMahon, son of wrestling magnate Vince McMahon and Donald Trump cabinet member Linda McMahon, has invested $500,000 in the legal marijuana cultivation business. In 2015, Mr. McMahon invested $500,000 in EnviroGrow, a company based in Connecticut that produces cultivation modules built into shipping containers. This is a top story because Mr. McMahon's mother, Linda McMahon, serves as administrator of the Small Business Administration, a cabinet-level position in an administration that's not very friendly to the idea of legal marijuana. While I certainly don't want to paint Mr. McMahon with a negative brush just because of his familial association with the worst president in history, it does fit the image of an administration who says one thing while doing another, usually to enrich themselves. Our final top story of the day brings us down to Florida, where the state says they will miss their deadline of tomorrow to issue 5 new medical marijuana licenses. The deadline was imposed by legislation passed this summer under a special legislative session and called for the 5 new licenses to be granted by tomorrow, with one set aside for a black farmer to settle a long-standing lawsuit between the federal government and a group of black farmers who say they were discriminated against in agricultural policy. On Friday, the executive director of the state's marijuana office, Christian Bax, sent a letter to lawmakers saying that his office had been delayed by Hurricane Irma and legal proceedings around the lawsuit between the federal government and the discriminated against black farmers. Right now, there's no word on when the licenses will be granted, so we'll make sure to check back on things as it evolves. Those are our top stories for today. It's time for Marijuana Today Daily Headlines Blitz. Before we blitz it in headlines, let's quickly thank our sponsor, Students for Sensible Drug Policy, which is celebrating their 19th year of being in existence. I know a lot of listeners know about my connection with SSDP, but for those that don't, I started a group 20 years ago in Rochester, New York, while I was a student at RIT called the Rochester Cannabis Coalition, which in its second year changed its name to Students for Sensible Drug Policy and became the first chapter of what is now an enormous and superbly effective nonprofit organization and agent of progressive change. SSDP is celebrating the turn into their 20th year by asking their supporters to chip in donations of $19. If you want to give some very much needed support to Students for Sensible Drug Policy and help them celebrate their impressive longevity, just open up ssdp.org/19. That's ssdp.org/19, as in the numbers 19. All right, time for the blitz. On Saturday, Maryland State Delegate Cheryl Glenn, chair of the state's Legislative Black Caucus, spoke at a public hearing and addressed the long-standing issue of how her state gave out marijuana business licenses. As regular listeners know, that process was done without any consideration for the racial diversity of license holders, even though the law calling for the formation of the system required that it do so. As a result, just about every license winner chosen was white, in a state where black people make up about a third of the population. At Saturday's public forum, Delegate Glenn said that she expects the state legislature to take up consideration of her bill to hand out more licenses to a more racially diverse group of people as soon as it meets again in January. And according to the Baltimore Sun, some members of Delegate Glenn's caucus say they will not cooperate in other legislative matters if that doesn't happen. This is one of the more dynamic, slow-burning stories in the industry right now, and we'll make sure to stay on top of it. Hawaii will soon open up its third medical marijuana dispensary, as on Friday, the state's Department of Health announced that Pono Life Sciences Maui LLC was approved to start up operations. The new dispensary will be the second shop located on the island of Maui. Colorado state lawmakers are meeting today to begin a special session to address a budgeting error that is diverting millions of dollars in legal marijuana tax revenue away from institutions like hospitals and regional transportation networks. This is a story we've covered for the past few months, with state Republican lawmakers most recently upset over the idea of spending $25,000 a day for 3 days of meetings so they can plug the legislative snafu that is taking up to $600,000 a month in vital funding from groups like the Denver Regional Transportation District. Swing over to CBS Denver for the full read on this one. As always, we have all the news we cover linked to on our website at mjtodaydaily.com and on our Twitter account at mjtodaydaily. The state of Massachusetts is starting to realize how much of a challenge it is for legal marijuana businesses to perform regular everyday business banking as the federal government continues to scare banks away from state legal marijuana. This is another long-running issue here on Marijuana Today Daily, with most legal cannabis businesses barred from using regular business banking services like bank accounts and checking. Over the weekend, Stephen Hoffman, chair of the state's Cannabis Control Commission, said that banking was one of the top issues that he and his team were working on. The Bozeman Daily Chronicle has a good article up about the muddy waters of medical marijuana in Montana, as patients await changes to the state system set to roll out in April. Those new rules will update requirements for caregivers and providers and will set up standards for the first time governing potency and safety testing. All of that uncertainty is trickling down to patients who aren't sure how they will fit into things come May. This is another excellent one to open up in full. As California begins to implement adult use legalization Proposition 64, one of the economic benefits sweeping the state is an increased need for government workers to oversee the industry. It's expected that thousands of new jobs will be created by both local and state government to handle all the rulemaking and regulating that legal cannabis requires. The LA Times did a good dive into the issue and found that a lot of the anticipated jobs will carry healthy levels of compensation. And finally for today, Dan Adams over at the Boston Globe took a look at the recently released FBI arrest statistics for Massachusetts for 2016 and found that while the number of arrests for marijuana charges fell in the state, the racial disparities in the numbers have not, mirroring a situation seen just about everywhere where marijuana laws are pushed in more progressive directions. This is one of our industry's biggest issues and something we have to solve. If the only thing we accomplish is to make sure that rich white people get arrested less for marijuana, then we'll have failed entirely. Open this one up and read in full. Those are the headlines and news for the day. I'll be back with you again tomorrow morning with another information-packed episode of Marijuana Today Daily. But in the meantime, if you have any stories to share or feedback to give, zip us an email to headlines@mjtodaydaily.com. And while you're clicking around the interwebs, swing over to our Twitter account at mjtodaydaily and visit our website at mjtodaydaily.com to find links to all the news we cover. Thanks to our sponsor, Students for Sensible Drug Policy, and to all of our awesome patron listeners for the support that makes this show possible. To join the illustrious ranks of the patron listeners yourself, swing over to our website at mjtodaydaily.com and click on that big blue button at the top of the page that says Become a Patron. I'm your host, Jay Gunther. Thanks for tuning in and starting your day with Marijuana Today.
One take, Shay. One take.